Are you starting a nonprofit and planning to file the paperwork yourself? Watching this video for the next 5 minutes could save you $8,000 on your nonprofit filing by helping you avoid an incredibly common mistake that self-filers make. Hey, I'm Dan Johnson. I have helped over 30 business owners and entrepreneurs launch their dream nonprofit, including going through the filing process. And going through this process myself has helped me realize how many traps there are for new nonprofit leaders. Now, when people go to start their nonprofit, a lot of them want to file their paperwork themselves because it's cheaper than hiring a professional. I recommend using a professional, but I get it. And you can't always afford to hire out. That said, there's one incredibly common mistake that self-filers make that can lead to big consequences for their nonprofit, including costing you up to $8,000, allowing the IRS to determine your nonprofit type. Let's start with some background. There are 34 classes of nonprofits, and they're based on the purpose of the organization. So you have some nonprofits that are primarily for helping the poor and educating people, some nonprofits that are primarily business associations, some nonprofits that are sports clubs, you name it, there's a classification for it. The most common classification for nonprofits is 501c3. And because it's the most common, there are 10 subclasses under section 501c3 that are based on the specific kind of work you do or the revenue you bring in. So when you go to file your nonprofit application with the IRS, whether you're using the long form or you're using the short form, at the end of the form, you're going to be asked to select a classification or the subclass that we talked about. And while a lot of these are fairly straightforward, you got church, school, hospital, we're not that, we're not that, there are several items on here that can be confusing for anyone who hasn't filed their nonprofit before. And as such, there is a really attractive option at the bottom which says you are a publicly supported organization and would like the IRS to determine the correct classification. They're the experts, right? We'll definitely have them determine it. The problem with that is if given the opportunity, because it is much easier to grant tax-exempt status to a private foundation than a standard charity, the IRS will determine that you are a private foundation. Now remember, private foundations are organizations that primarily give out money to other charities. They do not do the work themselves, and they're multi-million-dollar organizations, usually a lot of wealth that somebody has that they're investing into a foundation to invest into the community. And if the IRS designates you a private foundation, as you would expect with a large organization, there are a lot of costs that come with that. First of all, you have a lot of restrictions on how you can spend money, how board members are involved. You are required to give out a percentage of the money that you bring into other nonprofits for their work. And perhaps most importantly, you're required to file Form 990-PF. Form 990-PF is not an easy tax form. And I'll just briefly scroll here so you guys can see how challenging this is to fill out. It is about 13 pages long or so. And it is on question after question because, again, you are a multi-million-dollar organization and you have an accountant do this for you. But if you're not a multi-million-dollar organization and you're designated as a private foundation, guess what? You still have to fill out that form. That is going to cost you a minimum of $1,500. That leaves you with some really crappy options. Option one, you can continue as a private foundation and pay $1,500 a year to file your taxes and have all the restrictions that come with being effectively a slush fund from the IRS's perspective. And you're like, there's got to be a way out. There's got to be a way to change it. Yeah, so there is. Your ways out are, number one, you can terminate your private foundation. But the minute that you create a private foundation, you are required to file a Form 990-PF for that year. Right off the bat, it's going to cost you $1,500 extra that you were not expecting. You can terminate, but you still have to pay the $1,500 fee. And then you have the second option, which is you can change your nonprofit's subclassification, and you can change it from a private foundation to a public charity. That sounds great. However, A, there's a $400 filing fee for the form you use to file the IRS to get your private foundation status removed and changed to a public charity, which is what you probably want to be. And B, you have to file Form 990-PF for 60 months after you request that classification. That means you have to file this form 5 years, and that's 5 times $1,500. You're looking at $7,900 to change your status from private foundation to public charity at this innocent mistake that you made at the end of the form. Or you can refile. So you can terminate your nonprofit organization and refile as a public charity, which is probably your best option. That alone is going to cost you $4,000 between filing Form 990-PF, terminating, and refiling properly for a new organization. This is not a cheap mistake, and it is just based on the checkbox that you select at the end of your application. There are lots of other mistakes that you could make filing your nonprofit, even with the easy form, that can get you into really serious trouble. So I do recommend you have a professional, whether us or whether somebody else, you have somebody who knows this process and knows what the IRS is looking for, actually file your nonprofit for you. However, if you do file yourself, do not make this unnecessary mistake and give a ton of money to your CPA and the IRS to make up for it.